Should you or should you not hunt over scrapes before the pre-rut? I'm going to answer that question to the best of my ability in this video, so don't go anywhere. The answer to that question is a little more complex than you would think. It's not just yes or no. It really depends on the situation. But in certain situations, I would highly recommend setting up over scrapes if they're open before the pre-rut. You see, the other night I was doe hunting, early season doe hunting, something I like to do before the rut really picks up. And I was in a spot where there's a high doe density. And I was thinking that a doe was going to sneak through this area along the trail next to a river, but instead I had a visit from 2 bucks. As I was sitting there, the bucks actually ended up going around my deer stand all the way. So I know they smelled me. They circled around my tree, went down this trail to the river, right to the scrape. So the scrape right there is on the left side where that buck is rubbing his face all over the licking branch there. The buck on the right just snooping around for acorns because there's a bur oak tree around. They were real active. They were really interested in getting to the scrape. As a matter of fact, I know they winded me because we had a wind direction that was directly where the deer came from, and I was expecting deer to come from the opposite direction. This time of year, the bucks do not usually, or deer in general, do not usually do much with the dirt on the ground. They might kick it around a little bit. That picks up much more in October, at least here in Wisconsin. They mainly just rub their face on the branch, on the licking branch, and then move on because they're interested in smelling and learning more about other deer in the area. So the bucks ended up coming across this little creek and then came behind my stand, actually from my left. And the wind was blowing right from my direction to them. So I know they smelled me 100%. They came around, wrapped her all the way around, basically made a circle around my stand. They went through some thick cover, as you can see over there. I was expecting them to come from that area. They moseyed around and browsed in that thick cover past an oak tree, which is right over there, and then came down, browsed a little bit more, browsing on some oak trees, and then right there is where that scrape is that they immediately went to almost right away. There was no doubt that's what they were heading toward. And this is only September right now, early season still. You can tell by how green it is. They walked over there, they took turns working the scrape, and then they basically just went on their own way. I was expecting them to come from across the river right there, straight toward me, not from the left or certainly not behind me. I did not want to get winded, and I certainly did. They hesitated, they were wary, but they were so determined when they're in this area down here, standing below me, to get to that scrape. It didn't seem to really matter, and they shot off that way, walked around, like I explained before, then eventually found their way over in this general area and stayed there for like a half an hour. I actually almost burned through an entire GoPro battery watching them by this scrape. I went scouting yesterday and I found another scrape. I didn't see deer on it because I was just walking around, but I saw a scrape that was open. The licking branch was obviously being used on the scrape I saw yesterday, right adjacent to doe bedding where 2 trails intersected. And I think that's a really good place to start looking. So if you're curious where to find scrapes this time of year or any time of year, go on the edge of thick, high stem count bedding, and you're probably going to run across a couple of scrapes, on one side of the trail or sometimes right in the middle of the deer trail itself. And that scrape was open. It was very clear deer are using it right now, early season, just like the scrape that I shared with you in that video. So they are open right now, not as many as in October, but they are open, so you could possibly find some scrapes in your area if you go out and take a little scout. So in many ways, that situation's kind of got the best of both worlds. It's got an open scrape that's clearly being used right on the side of the river where deer often cruise from. They bed on the other side of the river, sometimes on that land you saw on the other side of the river where I was expecting them to come from. And then of course there's one bur oak right there, kind of up on a hill off to the right. And then when those acorns fall, because it's up on a hill, a lot of them roll down, or squirrels move them around, or the deer kick them around when they come through and they feed on that. So they've got some type of food source, a lot of browse because it's early season, and then that scrape right there. So if you're finding a scrape in a situation like that, I would definitely recommend hunting it before the pre-rut. Obviously the pre-rut's a much better time to hunt scrapes. In Wisconsin, that's like the 25th of October through the beginning of November. And you're gonna see a lot of deer working those scrapes around that time, especially if you find that adjacent to doe bedding. But I just thought it was really interesting. So if you're out there finding scrapes that are open, relatively close to bedding, especially if there's an oak tree dropping nearby, but if it's an open scrape right now, it's worth checking out. If you'd like to learn more about deer hunting, especially early season, click this video right here. It's going to help you out a lot. Make sure you subscribe. I'll see you later.